Welcome to our deep dive into one of the Bible's most mysterious and controversial tales, the story of the Nephilim and the sons of God. Were these divine beings truly angels? Who were the women they took, and what forbidden love gave rise to giants? In this episode, we unravel ancient lore, apocryphal texts, and hidden meanings behind Genesis 6. From ancient Hebrew myths to modern theories, we'll explore the line between divine and mortal, love and rebellion. Join us as we uncover the secrets of a story that has fascinated scholars and mystics for centuries. This is Forbidden Love in Ancient Lore. Angelic beings, fallen angels in ancient Jewish and early Christian traditions. The concept of angelic beings, particularly those who fall from divine grace, is a significant feature in ancient Jewish and early Christian thought. These beings, often portrayed as celestial intermediaries between God and humanity, take on more complex and sometimes troubling roles in extracanonical literature. One of the most detailed and influential texts describing such beings is the Book of 1 Enoch, a Jewish pseudepigraphal work written during the Second Temple period. This text, among others, outlines a tradition of angels who rebelled against divine order, primarily due to their desire for human women. This essay explores these angelic beings, focusing on their origins, roles, and theological implications, while situating the discussion within the broader cultural and religious context of ancient Judaism and early Christianity. 1. Angels in ancient Jewish thought. Angels, or Malakim in Hebrew, are traditionally seen as messengers of God in the Hebrew Bible. They appear frequently, often without names, and carry out specific missions, delivering divine messages, executing judgments, or offering protection. Unlike later Christian traditions, which often visualize angels with wings and halos, early Jewish views of angels were more function-oriented and less anthropomorphized. They served at God's command and reflected divine will. However, by the Second Temple period, c. 530 BCE, 70 CE, angelology, the study and classification of angels, had become far more elaborate. This was a time of intense theological reflection and cosmological speculation, influenced by Babylonian, Persian, and Hellenistic thought. During this period, various Jewish groups, including those represented in the Dead Sea Scrolls, developed rich mythologies surrounding angels, including the concept of angelic rebellion. 2. The Book of 1 Enoch and the Watchers. The Book of 1 Enoch, composed between the 3rd century BCE and the 1st century CE, is one of the most important sources for understanding the concept of fallen angels. Although not included in the Jewish or most Christian canons, it was widely read and influential in early Jewish and Christian circles. The most well-known section of 1 Enoch, the Book of the Watchers, chapters 1 to 36, recounts the story of angels who descended to earth and defied God. According to 1 Enoch 6 to 11, a group of 200 angels, called the Watchers, RN in Aramaic, led by a chief angel named Semjaza, descended to earth at Mount Hermon. Their goal was to mate with human women, an act strictly forbidden by divine law. The text describes how these angels saw and lusted after them, took them as wives, and fathered a race of giants called the Nephilim, a term that also appears briefly in Genesis 6 verses 1 to 4. The implications of this union were catastrophic. The Nephilim were violent and corrupt, bringing chaos and bloodshed to the earth. The Watchers also taught humanity forbidden knowledge, astrology, metallurgy, weaponry, cosmetics, and sorcery. These teachings corrupted human society, leading to widespread sin and moral decay. In response, God sends the archangels, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, and Gabriel, to deal with the fallen angels and their offspring. The Nephilim are destroyed in a great flood, while the Watchers are bound and imprisoned in the abyss, awaiting final judgment. 3. Theological and symbolic dimensions. The story of the Watchers in 1 Enoch carries profound theological significance. It offers an alternative explanation for the origin of evil, placing the blame not on human disobedience alone, as in Genesis 3, but on angelic rebellion and transgression. In this view, evil entered the world through celestial beings who were once part of God's divine counsel. This narrative also reflects anxieties about forbidden knowledge and the boundaries between the divine and the human. The Watchers' teachings, especially in areas like warcraft and enchantment, mirror real-world developments in ancient technology and esoteric wisdom. The condemnation of these teachings suggests that not all knowledge is beneficial or divinely sanctioned. Moreover, the Watchers' narrative echoes ancient Mesopotamian myths of divine beings interbreeding with humans, such as the Apkallu or demigods. It also resonates with Hellenistic ideas of titans or heroes born from gods and mortals, showing how Jewish writers engaged with and adapted surrounding mythologies to explain cosmic disorder. 4. Genesis 6 and its interpretation. The brief account in Genesis 6 verses 1-4 provided the raw material for the much-expanded Enochian tradition. This enigmatic passage speaks of the sons of God taking wives from the daughters of men, resulting in the birth of the Nephilim, mighty men of old. Early Jewish interpreters, especially those behind 1 Enoch, read this passage literally, understanding the sons of God as angels. However, later Jewish and Christian traditions often sought to reinterpret or downplay the more controversial aspects of this story. Rabbinic Judaism, for example, redefined the sons of God as noble men or descendants of Seth, distancing the narrative from any notion of angelic lust. Early Christian thinkers like Augustine followed this interpretation, concerned about maintaining the spiritual purity and incorporeality of angels. Still, the older, more mythological reading persisted in many circles, particularly among groups like the Essenes and early Christian sects influenced by apocalyptic literature. 5. The fall of Satan and related traditions. The story of the Watchers is often conflated with another tradition, the fall of Satan. However, these are distinct in origin and meaning. In 1 Enoch, the rebel angels are not led by Satan but by Semjaza and later Azazel, who teaches humanity about warfare and is singled out for especially harsh punishment. The figure of Satan, or Ha-Satan, the accuser, emerges in books like Job and Zechariah not as a rebel or evil being, but as a member of the divine court, a sort of celestial prosecutor. It is only in later Jewish apocalyptic texts and Christian theology that Satan becomes the archenemy of God, often identified with Lucifer, who falls due to pride, see Isaiah 14 and Ezekiel 28, interpreted allegorically. Still, these narratives began to merge over time, especially in Christian tradition, where fallen angels, demons, and Satan himself were woven into a single, coherent story of cosmic rebellion. In this synthesis, the Watchers became demons, Azazel became a prototype for the devil, and their offspring, the Nephilim, were sometimes seen as spirits who continue to trouble humanity. 6. The role of fallen angels in early Christian thought. While 1 Enoch is not part of the Christian canon, except in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, it deeply influenced early Christian writings. The New Testament contains several allusions to the Watchers and their fate. For example, 2 Peter 2 verse 4 says, "God did not spare the angels who sinned, but cast them down to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness, to be reserved for judgment." Similarly, Jude 6 refers to angels who did not keep their proper domain, but left their own habitation, who are now reserved in everlasting chains under darkness. These verses clearly echo the story of the Watchers in 1 Enoch, showing that early Christian authors were familiar with and influenced by this tradition. However, their use of the story shifts the focus toward themes of judgment and divine justice. The fate of the fallen angels becomes a warning to believers about the dangers of rebellion, pride, and moral transgression. In some Christian interpretations, the fall of the angels is also tied to Christ's redemptive mission. Just as the first heavenly beings fell and brought corruption, so Christ, the true Son of God, descends from heaven to restore order and reconcile creation. 7. Fallen angels, demons, and the spirit world. The idea that the spirits of the Nephilim became demons after their physical destruction, 1 Enoch 15-16, became a powerful theological explanation for the existence of malevolent supernatural beings. Unlike traditional angels or Satan, these demons were not created evil by God but originated from a perversion of creation, a forbidden union between heaven and earth. This notion helped explain the pervasive presence of evil in the world. Demons, as disembodied spirits of the Nephilim, were seen as responsible for disease, temptation, madness, and idolatry. They were active in the intertestamental period and prominently featured in the Gospels, where Jesus frequently confronts and exorcises them. Such ideas also contributed to later Christian demonology, which elaborated a complex hierarchy of fallen beings, including principalities, powers, and dominions. While not all of this developed directly from one Enoch, the seed of the idea that divine beings could fall, corrupt the world, and continue to influence it in spiritual form was already present. 8. Conclusion, rebellion, boundaries, and the human condition. The ancient traditions of fallen angels, especially as articulated in 1 Enoch, offer a rich and multifaceted understanding of evil, knowledge, and divine order. These stories reflect deep theological concerns about boundaries between divine and human, male and female, heaven and earth. The Watcher's transgression is not just one of lust, but of overstepping cosmic limits, of arrogating divine powers to themselves and humanity. In these ancient texts, fallen angels serve as both cautionary figures and explanations for a broken world. They symbolize the dangers of pride, curiosity unchecked by obedience, and desire untethered from divine wisdom. At the same time, their punishment and eventual judgment point to a cosmic hope that disorder will not prevail forever, and that divine justice will ultimately restore harmony. Though 1 Enoch is outside the biblical canon, its themes continue to reverberate through Christian theology, literature, and imagination. The idea of angelic rebellion and the blending of divine and human realms remains a potent symbol of both the heights of spiritual ambition and the depths of moral failure. In the end, the fallen angels are more than just myth. They are mirrors, reflecting humanity's own struggle to balance aspiration with humility, freedom with obedience, and knowledge with wisdom. Royal lineage theory, rabbinical and modern interpretations of the sons of God. The enigmatic passage in Genesis 6 verses 1-4, which refers to the sons of God cohabiting with the daughters of men, has inspired a range of interpretations across Jewish and Christian traditions. One such explanation is the royal lineage theory, which proposes that these sons of God were not angels or divine beings in the supernatural sense but rather members of a royal, divinely sanctioned human lineage, most commonly identified as the descendants of Seth, Adam's righteous son. This interpretation has been favored by many rabbinical authorities and later adopted by modern biblical scholars seeking a more naturalistic understanding of the passage. This essay will explore the foundations of the royal lineage theory, tracing its roots in early Jewish exegesis, its evolution in rabbinical literature, and its treatment in modern scholarship. We will also evaluate the theological implications and interpretive strengths and weaknesses of the theory. 1. The biblical passage in question. Genesis 6 verses 1-4, ESV, reads, "When men began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive. And they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh, his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown." The ambiguity centers around the identity of the sons of God and their actions. 3 dominant interpretations have historically emerged. Angelic/Watcher theory, sons of God refers to angels or divine beings, as in the Book of Enoch. Royal lineage theory, sons of God refers to noble or royal human lineages, especially the descendants of Seth. Tribal/ethnic theory, the phrase reflects social or political groupings, elites or rulers. The royal lineage theory falls into the second category, offering a theological and anthropological reading that aligns with monotheistic and anti-mythological tendencies in ancient Judaism. 2. Historical roots and rabbinical support. Early rabbinic resistance to mythologizing. From early on, Jewish interpreters showed discomfort with the more supernatural interpretations of Genesis 6. The Book of Enoch, which promotes the angelic interpretation, was influential in Second Temple Judaism, but was not accepted into the rabbinic canon. The Talmud and Midrashic texts are largely silent or ambiguous about the identity of the sons of God. Instead, post-biblical Jewish tradition increasingly leaned toward demythologized readings. Rabbinic authorities like Rashi, 1040–1105 CE, and Saadia Jain, 882–942 CE, rejected the angelic interpretation outright. Rashi, for instance, interpreted the sons of God as judges or nobility, not celestial beings. This aligns with the royal lineage theory's core principle: these were mortal men, but of high status or divine favor. B. The Sethite lineage interpretation. The Sethite interpretation specifically identifies the sons of God with the line of Seth, the third son of Adam and Eve, described in Genesis 4 verses 25–26 as fathering a righteous lineage that called upon the name of the Lord. In contrast, the descendants of Cain are depicted as morally corrupt and rebellious. Rabbinical sources such as the Midrash Rabbah and some later commentators equated the daughters of men with the Cainite women, implying that the sin was one of intermarriage between the godly and ungodly lines. This idea emphasizes not only moral boundaries but covenantal ones, a notion reinforced in later Jewish thought. 3. Theological and ethical themes. The royal lineage theory fits well within the broader biblical concern for holiness, covenant, and lineage purity, which are recurring themes in both the Pentateuch and prophetic literature. A. Covenant fidelity. Under this interpretation, the sons of God were part of a line called to uphold God's covenantal standards. Their failure to do so, by marrying outside the divine mandate, parallels later biblical warnings against intermarriage with pagan nations, Deuteronomy 7 verses 3–4. These unions, instead of preserving the holiness of God's people, led to moral degradation and social chaos. B. Moral decline and divine judgment. Genesis 6 sets the stage for the flood narrative, which is a response to the pervasive wickedness on earth. The intermarriage of Sethite men with Cainite women represents a broader breakdown of divine order. This fusion of the sacred and profane leads to the birth of the Nephilim, interpreted here not as giants in a supernatural sense, but as corrupt tyrants or warrior elites, further destabilizing society. Thus, the royal lineage theory makes the Genesis account a cautionary tale of leadership failure, where those entrusted with moral and spiritual guidance succumb to worldly desires. 4. Modern scholarly perspectives. A. Linguistic considerations. Many modern scholars supporting the royal lineage theory focus on the Hebrew phrase, sons of God, and its semantic range. While the term does appear in contexts referring to divine beings, e.g., Job 1 verse 6, it can also be interpreted metaphorically. Some note that El or Elohim in Semitic languages was also a title for powerful rulers. In ancient Near Eastern texts, kings often styled themselves as sons of gods. Thus, sons of God could simply mean divinely appointed rulers, echoing the royal ideology of the ancient world. This interpretation dovetails with the idea of a Sethite nobility ruling as stewards of divine will. B. Comparative literature and ancient context. Ancient Near Eastern myths, such as the Akkadian Atrahasis epic and the Ugaritic texts, speak of divine or semi-divine beings intermarrying with humans. By contrast, Genesis may 6 be polemical, rejecting such mythology by de-divinizing its characters. Rather than confirming these mythic unions, the biblical text subtly reframes the narrative in human, moralistic terms. The royal lineage theory helps support this anti-myth agenda, reinforcing the monotheistic worldview of the Hebrew Bible. 5. Strengths of the royal lineage theory. A. Theologically consistent with monotheism. By interpreting sons of God as human rather than divine beings, the royal lineage theory upholds strict monotheism, avoiding any suggestion of divine beings cohabiting with humans, a notion more in line with pagan mythologies. B. Ethical and covenant-based interpretation. This reading highlights human responsibility and ethical decline rather than supernatural incursions. It makes the cause of divine judgment in the flood a result of human failure, which is more consistent with the larger biblical narrative that emphasizes free will, moral choice, and covenant fidelity. C. Supported by broader biblical themes. Throughout the Hebrew Bible, there is a concern about the corruption of leadership, as seen in the stories of Saul, David, and Solomon. the royal lineage theory turns Genesis 6 into a proto-warning about the dangers of spiritual compromise among rulers and elite classes. 6. Weaknesses and critiques. A. Lexical and contextual tensions. Critics argue that the phrase "sons of God" more commonly refers to divine beings, especially in Job and Psalms. They question whether the royal lineage theory can override this textual precedent without clearer internal evidence. B. The role of the Nephilim. The passage connects the sons of God union with the birth of the Nephilim, a term associated with mighty warriors or giants. The supernatural interpretation makes more immediate sense of this outcome. Supporters of the royal lineage theory must reinterpret the Nephilim as powerful human tyrants, which, while plausible, is not the most obvious reading. C. Lack of explicit Sethite-Cainite references. Genesis 6 does not explicitly name Seth or Cain in this passage. This leads some scholars to argue that the Sethite/Cainite framework is an eisegetical, reading into the text, rather than an exegetically, drawing from the text, move. 7. Influence on Christian thought. The royal lineage theory, while rooted in Jewish exegesis, also influenced early Christian interpretation. Church fathers such as Augustine of Hippo promoted a similar view, interpreting the sons of God as the faithful line of Seth and the daughters of men as the ungodly descendants of Cain. Augustine's City of God draws heavily on this dichotomy between the city of God and the city of men. This interpretation found its way into mainstream Western theology, especially among reformers like John Calvin, who rejected any notion of angelic human unions. The royal lineage theory offers a compelling and theologically grounded interpretation of Genesis 6. Rooted in rabbinical resistance to pagan mythologies and later affirmed by Christian thinkers, it frames the sons of God as members of a righteous royal line, likely Seth's descendants, who fell from their divine calling through covenantal disobedience. While not without its interpretive challenges, the theory aligns with broader biblical themes of holiness, leadership, and judgment. It serves not only as a reading of an obscure passage but as a microcosm of the biblical worldview, that human beings, especially those in positions of spiritual and social authority, are accountable to God, and that failure to uphold this responsibility leads to societal collapse. In doing so, the royal lineage theory transforms a mysterious text into a powerful moral and theological statement, one that continues to resonate in discussions of faith, power, and human nature. Thanks for joining us on this journey through the mysterious tale of the Nephilim and the sons of God. From ancient texts to hidden meanings, we've only scratched the surface of this forbidden love that shook heaven and earth. What do you believe, myth, truth, or something in between? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you won't miss more deep dives into ancient mysteries and forgotten lore. Until next time, stay curious, question everything, and keep exploring the secrets buried in time. This is Forbidden Love in Ancient Lore.